episode number 7, here with Patrick Hastings, Gilman English Department Chair and English teacher and coach at Gilman, and we're going to talk a lot today about some good news, which I'm really excited to get to and discuss with you and kind of announce, really, because we've been in such a weird scenario here with not being as connected as usual that you probably haven't been able to really announce this. I know you told the English department, but it's kind of been on the down low. So excited to get to that today, Patrick. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
And I do have, to start out, a little gift for you.
Oh.
And Cesare, I have one for you as well.
Oh, sweet.
But a little
merch.
So if we can hold that up, there we go. Hopefully that size works, but
perfect.
I have some of those in.
Yeah. These are great. How cool.
Little Under Armour
sponsor.
Under Armour
path to follow. It's a hot pod right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Patrick, maybe we can start out with the good news here.
Sure. Yeah. So I just found out a couple weeks ago that a book proposal that I submitted to Johns Hopkins University Press has been approved and received an advance contract on a book project that I essentially have the rough draft of the manuscript, and I've been for the past couple months going back and revising that manuscript. But on spec, we're moving forward with a book on James Joyce's Ulysses.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You are the master of James Joyce's Ulysses. I do have it here. I brought the prop. How long have you been working on this book?
So it started, I guess it was summer of 15, maybe. It started as a website project that I applied for a summer grant here through the school. The school's awesome about providing those sorts of funds to do some kind of independent work during the summers in support of your classes. So it really started as I wanted to build a website to support my students, the kids who take my senior elective on Ulysses, where I wanted to pull in and kind of create a multimodal means of giving my students the photographs that I've taken in Dublin when I've gone over there that are related to the novel, the text that I've written to help guide them through the book as we read it, links to other websites and other resources that are available online. And so it started out as just like a website that was for my students. And then I guess it was 2 years ago, I kind of did a quick search on the analytics that I built the website on Squarespace, and saw that it was being used across the world. I published it on the web, but did not expect for it to kind of gain the traction that it did. And I was pretty flabbergasted to see that it was being used all across the world. So, and Google had put it up at the top of kind of any search results.
Yeah, it comes right up. It's the first, when you type in Ulysses guide or help to reading Ulysses, it's the first one that comes up.
Yeah, so that was exciting, but also it raised the stakes because it was kind of like, okay, Google thinks I'm legit. I better make sure that I am. So really it became less like something that I was putting together for my students and something that I started to conceive of as a project that I was sharing with the wider world. And the user numbers kept going up and up and up to the point when I got up to 7,000 users a month, unique users a month. And at that point I was like, if this is being used this widely over the guidebooks that do currently exist in print, then maybe there's a preference for this, and maybe I could convert this into a book, and maybe there's a version of this material and this content that would be really nice to have in print for people. I also had I started kind of looking through the analytics, and I could tell that some people would go on the website once a week and go on to 2 or 3 of the episode guides for a minute at a time, and then come back a week later and do the same thing. And what I realized is that they were printing out the 20 pages that I had posted on there. And I was like, okay, well, if people are preferring to experience this as a text, then maybe I need to pursue this. So at that point, I started thinking about putting together a book proposal and submitting it out and things like that. So it started as a project for my students. It still is, in essence, a project for my students. The voice that I've found in the writing is really oriented towards, the Gilman boys, smart readers with a sense of humor. And I've found that kind of pitch, has been really appealing to a lot of people across the world.
Why do you think that is? Because for people who haven't, maybe we could talk about Ulysses.
Sure.
And for people who don't really know what Ulysses is, it was a breakthrough modernist novel published 1922. And what about Ulysses? I read it in college, and I took a Ulysses class with this professor, Beth Blum, and she was somewhat of a Ulysses expert. She had this whole modernist class. But when I was reading it, it was like the middle of lacrosse season. You need to invest a lot of time, and I would say you probably need to take a class to really get everything that you can out of it, unless you have a guide like this, which has been helpful to people kind of just reading it on their own.
No, I think that's so. Yeah, we can talk about Ulysses generally, and then kind of shift to that. It's kind of considered the epic of modernism. It is modeled, as the title suggests, on Homer's Odyssey. As more or less like a framework for correspondences, and most of those correspondences are ironic. Like Joyce is always going to subvert any sort of anything that's like too on the nose. He's never going to go for that. But it takes place over the course of one day, June 16th, 1904, primarily from the primarily focalized in two characters: Leopold Bloom, who's a 38-year-old. Jewish man, and a 22-year-old character named Stephen Dedalus, who is first introduced in Joyce's earliest novel, Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. So it's a continuation of his narrative, and then Bloom really kind of takes over the story. So as the novel goes, the style becomes much more revolutionary, inventive. The 7th episode is written with newspaper headlines. That's what I just read with my seniors. So it's like all of a sudden, you get to the 7th chapter and it's like, whoa, why are there newspaper headlines? Why is this a newspaper? Is this a novel still? What's going on? There's almost a fifth of the novel is written as a play. I mean, it's real. It just like really kind of deconstructs what a novel can be and should be. Like
when you begin the first couple episodes, number 1, number 2, number 3, it's definitely readable and you can grasp it, but then it kind of devolves into something more where you need that support.
Yeah, I think that's right. So the first 6 episodes are often termed the initial style. Joyce referred to it as that in a couple letters. And those episodes in and of themselves are challenging for a lot of readers because of, he shifts between stream of consciousness, so like access to inner monologue. His dialogue isn't set off with quotation marks. It's like he gets like an M dash, and then the third person narrator also has access to characters' interiority. So there's a lot of like mixed modes of narrative and storytelling, and whose language is this, and where is it coming from? So it takes a little bit of, my students often it takes a little bit of time to get their feet under them in that style. And then as soon as you do, he departs from it and starts pushing you into new territory. But in that way, I do think that Joyce teaches you how to read the novel as you go, if you're like a careful kind of student of it. But I think you're right. It does require a commitment of energy, and it's not the sort of thing that you can just read 5 pages.
It's not a summer beach read.
It's not a summer beach read.
Yeah.
It's not the sort of thing you can read 5 pages at night before bed. You've really got to sit down with a pen and engage with this text. Like I would say, like episode by episode almost. Like you really got to, sustain the experience of the reading and pick up on beginning to end each episode. And then you can put it aside for a week and come back and do the next episode once you've kind of recharged the batteries. But I do think it isn't the sort of thing you can just kind of pick up and put down, because you'll end up leaving it put down for a while. Yeah.
Right. So one of the things that I remember in my first couple meetings with you was every time I came into your office, you always had Ulysses on your desk.
Yeah.
And one of the things you said was, I want to read this book every day of my life. What is it about Ulysses that really grasped you on your first, like, tell me your story about how you got so invested in this book.
So there's the first part of the story is that in the summer of 2003, I lived and worked at Shakespeare & Company bookstore in Paris on the left bank. And Shakespeare & Company published the first edition of Ulysses in 1922. When the English-speaking world had banned the novel for its obscenity and its more, I guess, forward-leaning content, you could say. And so go ahead.
It was banned?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it was written in 1922. Why was it banned during that time? That doesn't seem like the 20s, that doesn't seem like a time for a book to be like this, to be banned.
Yeah, I think most of Joyce's works struggled to be published because, the Dubliner stories, it took a long time for those to actually come out in print because there's profanity, there's portrayal of alcoholism, there's portrayal of misogyny and objectification of the people in different ways. And Joyce's attitude was that he was presenting to the world what he described as a nicely polished looking glass, that is a mirror. And if you don't like what you see in the mirror, that ultimately that's not the mirror's fault. If this is real life, if a character like Jack Mooney uses the word bloody because that's what Joyce felt like a character like Jack Mooney would say in that sense, and you won't publish that because that word is obscene, then, well, what are we doing in literature? What is the whole point? So, Ulysses has certainly some, like, I think even today people find like fairly scandalous content. It's stylized, and it's presented in a way that's it's certainly not tittillating, but it is edgy, I think you could say that. But it's it's a novel that pushed the boundaries of those sorts of things. And so it's banned for 12 years. It's not until 34 that in the United States, Judge John Woolsey, for whom the Elizabeth Woolsey Gilman Prize that we have here every year is named, it's his family. He kind of fancied himself a lover of literature and was assigned the case and read the novel along with critical works that were taped inside the book, which was really clever of Random House to have it confiscated with scholarly articles in there. So he reads it and says, okay, like, this thing is not obscene. It's not meant to corrupt public morals, and it becomes Random House gets the A-OK to publish it. So yeah, if there's 12 years where the book is not available in the English-speaking world, except smuggled in from Paris, from the Shakespeare & Company edition. Yeah. So
how did you get there? Were you already invested in Ulysses before you went there, or was that just something that came from that experience?
Yeah. So I spent that summer there, and to be clear, the Shakespeare & Company that currently exists on the left bank is a kind of a recreation and a different bookstore from the one that Sylvia Beach ran in the 20s and 30s. This one, the one that I was in, was started in 1951 by a man named George Whitman, and he changed the name of his bookstore, which was originally called Les Mistral, into Shakespeare & Company in 1964. So it embodies the same spirit of an American bookstore in Paris, expatriate community, that sort of thing. So working and living there in George Whitman's Shakespeare & Company, because of the association of the name Shakespeare & Company with Ulysses, like, the novel was kind of always in the air around there, and people were always kind of talking about it. It was part of the lore of the place, and also just part of the thing that a group of young writers and readers talk about, in Paris, because Joyce lived in Paris, and so it was in the air there, and it was kind of like, okay, I think I'm going to probably do something about this, and came back to the States, and that fall wrote an independent study on the literary history of Shakespeare and Company bookstore, that then became an honors thesis. And once it became an honors thesis, it was like, okay, well, I should probably read Ulysses to better inform this literary history. So it wasn't until my senior year that I read the novel, senior year of undergrad, and kind of unusually, I was reading it and then meeting with my thesis advisor every week or two, but I kind of read Ulysses by myself, and never took a course on it until my fourth year of graduate school. So I had already read the novel 8 or 9 times by that point, and taught it for almost 10 years before I finally took a course on it. So most people, I think, would share your opinion that you can't really read this thing without being in a class, but for whatever reason, and by some anomaly, like, I was more or less a self-taught Joycean for a long time. And
did you use, when you were first reading it, did you use certain resources? Because for people who haven't read it, like when you get to like Circe, it's like almost, I could barely get through that.
Yeah. So the Gifford, I read my first reading, I had the Gifford open the whole time, and that's the book that has all the annotations. So it's like almost word by word an explanation of what's there, and what Joyce is alluding to, and what kind of correspondence he's playing with, or what that song, what's that snippet of, like, I don't know what that, okay, that's from a play, oh, that's from a popular song in the turn of the century Dublin, oh, that's the name of the person who lived at that address in 1904, all those sorts of references get explained. So I read pretty carefully with the Gifford on my first read, so that helped ground me. There's another book that's kind of been the accepted guide to Ulysses. It's by a man named Harry Blamirez, and it's called The New Bloomsday Book, and it came out in the 60s, and it's good. That's the book that I'm trying to kind of unseat with my book. And there's some reasons for that, and it's helpful. I find it helpful more as like a reference or a resource, like what is going on in that passage, and go and check it there. But it's less of cover to cover, like read this and have a sense of what's going on in Ulysses. But yeah, I use those two resources, and the Gifford though was really my kind of crutch getting through it.
And that inspired kind of your master's track of studying it more in depth?
Yeah. So in my master's program, so I went to the Breadloaf School of English through Middlebury. My second year of that program, I'd already been teaching Ulysses. I was taking a course on media literacy and kind of digital humanities. And for one of my final projects, I guess it was my final project, or maybe one of my projects for that course, I created a Google Lit trip on Ulysses, where I used Google Earth to map pathways and insert my photographs with captions, which were the passages from the novel. So I kind of built like an interactive program, application within Google Earth for reading Ulysses. So I would always find ways in my master's program to bring it back to my interest in Ulysses. But I didn't take a Ulysses class until my fourth year, when I did my fourth year of Breadloaf at Oxford. So there's a Joycean there named Jerry Johnson, who's a big deal. And I figured that would be a great opportunity to finally have a teacher of Ulysses. My thesis advisor, Mark Connor, is a total rock star, and he helped me a lot and shaped my experience of the novel. But I'd never had like a teacher that I went to for like a Joyce class until Jerry Johnson, which is really neat. And she's kind of a rock star, kind of acts like a rock star too. Yeah. Like she's got a little bit of that. she's cool type scholar in our like nerdy rock star world.
Your
But
Joycean network.
Yeah,
That's cool.
So I took her class, and obviously taking a class in Oxford where you have the Bodleian Library, the type of research that I could do there was pretty incredible, and wrote some good stuff there, some of which ended up getting published in the James Joyce Quarterly. And that kind of really like raised the stakes where it's like, okay, I'm going to start taking myself more serious. I think I can take myself more seriously in this work. Then the website, and then it really felt like it was more serious. And so here we are.
When you were over there during your 4th year of Breadloaf, was that the first time you went to Dublin and did the kind of the walking tour, or was that later on?
It was later on. So my 4th year of Breadloaf was 2011, and I went in 2006 in March of 2006 to Dublin for 2 weeks to read Ulysses on site.
What was that like?
It was amazing. It was just so fun.
I've heard you talk about that before.
It was a great experience. So I was, at that time, I was teaching at a school in Wilmington, Delaware called Tower Hill School. I taught there for 2 years prior to coming to Gilman. And they had, similar to Gilman, really generous kind of support of those sorts of, travel abroad, stuff that would enhance your teaching. And so I went over to Dublin. We had a 2-week spring break at Tower Hill. And I was like, I'm going to use these 2 weeks. I'm going to go read Ulysses on site. So I showed up in Dublin the morning after St. Patrick's Day, which was a quiet city until about 3:00 that afternoon. So I kind of hit the ground running and did some reading on site, went out and saw the Joyce Tower and that museum, did some of those walking, some of the early episode walking tours, using a book by a man named Robert Nicholson that is a nice little, it's got like, look for this, look for that, turn here. So I did that in 2006. It was phenomenal. Both the experience of reading the novel over the course of 2 weeks, just really compressed, tight, immersive experience, but then also being in the city and picking up on things that you might otherwise not notice. Like you look up and you see like the confectioner's hall is still on the facade above the main facade, which is now a Foot Locker. It's like, oh, like vestiges of Joyce's Dublin are still there. And when you're really in the text and walking around, I didn't know anybody in Dublin. I was all by myself.
Yeah.
I was kind of like in Dublin with Bloom and Stephen. Like
wow.
they were my companions, staying in youth hostels for like 20 euros a night, and it was a really cool experience. Really
That's
cool
amazing.
experience. Yeah.
And what is it? So I know Joyce. He was born in Dublin, right? But he spent a lot of time in Paris and in some other cities. And I was just looking at some stuff before I came to talk to you. One of the things that he said was, if I can write about Dublin, I can write about anywhere in the world. Or there's something about Dublin for him that like struck him that he needed to write about. Do you have like kind of a sense of like what? I've never been to Dublin.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is there something about that place that influenced him to set his greatest work there? It's
a great question. So I mean, first of all, Dublin's a wonderful city, and very walkable. In my experience, very friendly, but also cagey. Like has a character. Like is, there's a mischievous attitude and posture to Dubliners that you kind of got to be on your toes, and they'll say things you're like, is that sarcasm? I think that was sarcasm. You catch those moments. But I think it's a global city even at the turn of the century, because it has it's a port city. It has exports that they're putting out into the world. So while being integrated into a larger global economy as early as that, it's still under British colonial rule. So there's without a doubt, like they're the oppressed, but you're also part of a larger power structure. It is, it had, even at that time, it had a very modern public transit system, a system of trams that went throughout the city. One of the most kind of modern, like a trolley type structure, infrastructure. Way before that was common in major cities. I guess it's kind of like a small town, but a big enough city. There were about 300,000 people in Dublin at the time. So it's kind of like Baltimore type vibe where you might walk through an area of town and see a couple people that you know, but big enough that you could still have some anonymity if you go to a different, walk a different way. I'm not surprised that he would make that quote because it was, it was a global city while also being very provincial and very much rooted in its own culture and kind of interested in itself, in part because it's trying to establish its identity while being under colonial rule. So. Right. Yeah, I mean it's kind of got a little bit of everything for Joyce and still today. I mean it's a European city, but it's also British, Irish obviously, but still part of the British Isles, and it's a pretty fascinating place.
Cool. Yeah, I definitely want to get over there. And,
you should.
Yeah, check it out.
Yeah, and the Guinness tastes better there too.
Yeah,
it's really good.
Awesome. Well, so. Let's go back to talking a little bit about James Joyce, because he is a very interesting, and I wish I knew a little bit more about him, but I'm glad that we're able to sit down. I would just like to know about him and not only what made him James Joyce, but also what inspired him to put this together. And like one of his quotes that I remember, I think that I probably picked up in that class that I took in college, the modernist class, was he wanted to send like professors on a wild goose chase into finding these allusions and understanding these references in the book. What is James Joyce like?
I don't know that I can presume to answer that, but I guess some of that caginess and that mischievous attitude,
kind of rebellious.
That thing that I was describing of like Dubliners is I think a lot of what is in this book. I mean, it's funny. He also so Joyce leaves Dublin, conceives of himself as like an exile, and a martyr for his art, for wanting to be the type of artist that he wanted to be. He was frustrated socially in Dublin. He was frustrated artistically. He was frustrated by the fact that like the Abbey Theatre, which Yeats had started, was only showing Irish plays, only putting on Irish plays. And he was like, let's put some Ibsen up. Like, let's be part of a larger conversation. There's great literature out there that isn't just Irish literature. So kind of frustrated by some of those nationalist efforts that he felt was going to restrict his own ability to express himself as he wanted, and write the type of book that he wanted to write. So he, like you said, lives in Paris for some time, lives in Trieste, Pula, Rome, Zurich. He bebops around Europe a bit before settling in Paris for like kind of the 1920 to 1940. I think he moves to Zurich again in 37.
Did he write this in Paris?
So he starts writing it in 1914 when he's in Trieste, and then writes more in Zurich, and then finishes it in Paris. So
interesting that he wasn't even in Dublin when he wrote it.
Yeah, went back to Dublin only like 2 or 3 times after leaving in 1904. So he's writing this novel that is so committed to depicting this city so realistically from memory. And he wrote back to his Aunt Josephine to ask. We have these letters where he's asking like, how many steps would it take to get from the back of this church to this street, so that he could then reflect that reality in the inner monologues that he's depicting in the characters as they take those steps, or like how many trees are in this yard at this person's house, and those sorts of level of detail, like really astonishing. But yeah, he's got all these illusions. I mean, his brother Stanislaus, he felt like, okay, and criticized, and so did Ezra Pound to a degree, saying like, this is more like an encyclopedia than it is a novel. Like and Stanislaus said, like, you're just trying to put everything that you know into this. And there's some truth to that, I think. It's filled with stuff, but it coheres. And I think that's the trick, is that it all contributes and coalesces to meaning, and like the parts contribute to the whole in a way that is authentic and is not, I mean, it's showy for sure. I mean, he's like definitely flexing on all the Aristotle that he knows and all the operatic lyrics that he knows, but he's also, it's not just there for its own sake.
Right. Okay. And interesting. So what exactly is calling the book Ulysses is a reference to the Odyssey, but yet it's about two guys kind of just bopping around Dublin. Why is he making the allusion to such like a important heroic figure with a story about two 22 and 38-year-old guys just moving around Ireland? What is that about?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think at its core, I think Joyce feels like that archetype of the father and son atonement sort of story is so central to Western culture. From the Odyssey, he deals a lot with Hamlet, a lot of allusions, heavy correspondences to Hamlet, which is about a son, striving to be atoned with his dead father and make him proud. So Leopold Bloom, the 38-year-old, has a son who died in infancy, and Stephen Dedalus, the 22-year-old, has a father who is an alcoholic and is not what Stephen needs. So the story of, over the course of this one day, spoiler alert, it ends up like Bloom and Stephen meet, and they know each other from just kind of being in this small city. But they're, the narrative is again, like loosely, on a framework of Telemachus searching for news of his father, trying to, find out, is my father alive? Is there somebody out there for me? And Odysseus trying to get home to Ithaca, and his wife, Penelope, who has been faithful in the face of the suitors trying to get her to remarry. Of course, Joyce is going to undercut that because Leopold Bloom's wife, Molly Bloom, has an affair on this day, on June 16th, 1904. And that's at the background of his thinking all day long, is like that he knows that this is going to happen. And so it's a version of that the Odyssey's story. It's ironic, but it's striving to offer a new conception of the epic hero. And Bloom, rather than being this guy who comes home and slaughters the suitors, indiscriminately.
He knows about the affair too, right?
Bloom knows about the affair. It's an act of, well, you could call it an act of generosity or of wisdom, passivity. I mean, there's a lot of things that you could say about the fact that he knows that this is going to happen and he lets it happen. But he thinks it's useless to prevent it, ultimately. If she wants to have this affair, she's going to. Mm-hmm. And for him to like barge home at 4:00 when the guy Blazes Boylan's supposed to come, okay, you may disrupt it today, but
doesn't
June 18th, 1904, she'll find a way. And he's heroic in lots of ways. He's kind. He endures some of the pokes that he takes as a Jewish man in a city that has an anti-Semitic streak, for sure. He is largely isolated within this community, but he's committed to his job. He's committed to Ireland, despite the fact that it might not be as committed to him. So there, I mean, it's Joyce kind of reimagining and reconceiving of what an epic hero is in the 20th century, in the modern age, and how do you go through a city and do business. He's an advertising agent, and deal with a bunch of kind of good old boys that he's engaging with on business front, on a social front. How do you kind of get through that? How do you endure in this era? So yeah, the modern man.
And that's clear through, and that's like realized through the stream of consciousness. That's how you kind of, understand these characters, is through just noticing their thoughts.
Sure.
Right. Like.
Yeah. I mean, I without a doubt. I mean, the level of intimacy that we develop with these characters is second to none. And I often feel like, okay, I've spent 650 pages with Leopold Bloom-ish, somewhere in there. Other characters take the center stage for a lot. But, I mean, you know more about him than you know about anybody in real life. Like, because you're granted such intimate, unfettered, unfiltered access to what he is thinking, like good, bad, and ugly. So you know everything there is to know about this guy almost by the end of the day, in a way that, like, your best friend, your spouse, partner, like you might not know what the right question is to lift up the rock that you find out, oh, that happened to you in 7th grade. Like, right. Never knew that. And we just learned those sorts of, moments from his life. So incredibly, close relationship that you form with this guy. And that, I think, one of the great things about Ulysses, and one of the things that, why I, to come back to your kind of memory of me saying that I want to read this book every day, is as you change, I'm now pushing 38. I read this book for the first time at Stephen's age. It's like the novel changes, and your reaction to certain things and your kind of impression of what adulthood, what real life is like, changes. And so you might have been really appalled by something that happens in the novel, when you were 25, but then when you read it when you're, Bloom's age, you're like, I can see that.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that makes a little bit more sense.
Any specific examples of how it's changed for you? Just generally, it's, as you've kind of had more life experience, things just look different. And I noticed that even in a year of teaching the same book, it's like, this is totally different for me. I've noticed more details. I can speak to certain things like I couldn't when I first came here and started teaching. But especially with a book like this, when you just notice new things every time you sit down with it, probably, how is that? What are some specific things that have shifted?
Oh gosh. I mean, it really is like a page by page, sort of thing. But I think specifically, you notice, I remember reading this early on and feeling like really protective of Bloom, and like wanting, like, because he doesn't stand up for himself enough, like wanting to stand up for him and like set the record straight, and like, being, 20, and being like, oh, fix that guy's wagon. I'll let him know what's up.
Yeah.
You don't talk to my buddy Bloom that way.
Right.
Now my age, you learn, like, in adulthood, like, you pick your battles, and there are things where you're like, oh, okay, that didn't go so well, or I think that person might have been teasing me or making fun of me, and you hope that as you get more mature, you take a little bit more of that, like, observational, like, I think I know what just happened there, and I'll keep that tucked away and kind of keep moving with my life and keep focused on the things that I need to actually get done. Certainly that has been part of it. But the stuff with Molly, and I mean, I'm blessed to have a really wonderful marriage, but I have friends who share things about stuff in their relationships where, pretty inconceivable to a 20-something to, like, allow their wife to have an affair on an afternoon. Like, when you kind of understand the ups and downs of a relationship and what might be the right thing for a relationship, I can't identify or like share Bloom's experience in that way, but I understand it a little bit better now as you get a little bit older. And it's one of the things that my students are always like, or often there's a one or two who is really vocal about no way a dude lets his wife have an affair. And that's a great perspective to have in the class, and to rely on, that counterpoint to have Bloom then push back against as you read, and kind of bring Bloom's own, because I'm not going to defend Bloom. I'm over that. But let Bloom defend himself, and like bring those passages to light, to be like, all right, how do you appreciate the wisdom that he's expressing here, or do you still not buy it? Like those sorts of moments are really fun.
Awesome. Is the book kind of more focused on Bloom, or is Stephen, like, where does Stephen come in? Because I know he's the younger character, maybe someone that the high school guys can identify with more than the 38-year-old, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because Stephen himself is like intellectually so elite and living in his own world in that way.
Is he a depiction of Joyce himself, or can we not make that? Yes.
Yeah. It's an autobiographical. It's like quasi autobiographical. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of Joyce and Stephen, from Portrait of the Artist all the way up through Ulysses. So Stephen gets the first 3 episodes, just like Telemachus gets the first 4 books of the Odyssey. And then the novel restarts with Bloom, just like the Odyssey restarts with Odysseus on Calypso's island. So the Ulysses restarts with Bloom, and we're with him. Really, I mean, we have like some near misses with Stephen. It's not until episode 9. So from 4 to 9, we're with Bloom pretty exclusively.
And how many episodes are there?
There are 18.
18.
So the 9th episode is Stephen delivering his lecture on Hamlet in the library, although it's not really a lecture. It's more of like a conversation with a few people in a library office, but it's been kind of much anticipated, and it's hinted that that's going to happen at some point in the day. So you have like the 9th episode is with Stephen. The 10th episode, Wandering Rocks, is like a cityscape, and there are 19 different subsections that all depict different random Dubliners. And so it's really more of and like Stephen and Bloom each get one of those sections, but they are not the main focus of Wandering Rocks. The 11th episode is back with Bloom, 12 Bloom, 13 Bloom, 14 Stephen, and then Bloom, and then from that point on, they're together. Stephen's in bad shape. He's been drinking too much, and Bloom is like, I got to take care of this kid. Like, I can't just like leave him at 11 o'clock at night on his own. Like, I think this is not going to end well. So Bloom like kind of follows him, takes care of him a bit, make sure he doesn't get in any trouble.
Kind of like a father, like chapter. Yep.
Yeah. So from 14, 15, 16, 17 those episodes are Stephen and Bloom together. 17th being when they go home. They go to Bloom's house. Bloom takes him home for some hot cocoa, and they have some time together. And then the 18th episode is Penelope, and that is Bloom has gone to bed, and now Molly wakes up, and it's wee hours of the morning, and we get Molly's like famous 40-page like no periods, all stream of consciousness. So her inner monologue finishes. She gets the last word in the book.
Interesting, because she doesn't really come into play for those 17 chapters as much, right? Or
yeah, so she's always in Bloom's mind, you know, as you can imagine, on this particular day. But yeah, she's in Calypso. So when Bloom is like, he makes her breakfast and like says bye to, like
it's like the mundane kind of relationship, kind of
so
going to work.
Exactly. Like the 8 o'clock hour before going off to do what he needs to do for the day, he's with Molly, and is in their bedroom, like brings her breakfast in bed, actually. And then Molly's not. The only other glimpse we get of her is in Wandering Rocks. It's not directly explicitly said that this is Molly, but she tosses a coin out the window to a one-legged beggar who's like calling out, asking for some spare change, basically.
It's like an extra.
Yeah, it's just like her arm. It's her arm, which you have to like piece together a few things to be like, oh, I think that's Molly's arm. Yes, it is. Yeah, but that's the only other glimpse of her that we actually get in reality, in the actual like this happens on this day. So,
do you have a favorite episode?
It changes every year. I mean, Lestrygonians, which is the episode that I'm about to start teaching with my seniors.
What chapters?
That's the eighth. It is one of my favorites. So it's the 1 o'clock hour, and it's Bloom like walking straight through the heart of downtown to get lunch. He's hungry, so like food's on the brain. So there's like some stylistic, kind of rhetorical flourishes having to do with food and digestion and things like that. He buys a Banbury cake and feeds the gulls, like off the O'Connell Bridge. So it's very much rooted in the heart of downtown. So like you can walk through and like see everything that he references, which is really cool. Passes Trinity College and then goes to this and ends up at this pub called Davy Burns Pub, which is still there, still very much like identifies itself with Ulysses because it's it comes off pretty well in the novel. So it's an episode that I love because it does return to the initial style, but it just depicts the city in this like really vivid way, and many of those places and much of those kind of city identifiers are still there, and so you can kind of do that walk and be like, wow, like this city, he nailed it. This is the city that he wrote.
It's amazing because you have all that about the geography and the city layout, but you also have him thinking about, he's walking, but he's also thinking about what he wants to eat. Like the psychology of that chapter too that's cool.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Great. So let's see what else. So, all right. So Ulysses, written in 1922. Mm-hmm. He also wrote a few, he wrote The Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. And then Finnegan's Wake is another one. Have you studied that one much? Because that was one I could barely get to the first page.
No, I have the extent of my experience with Finnegan's Wake, which is like for me, it's pretty nonsensical.
Why did he write something like that? What is the purpose?
I mean, so it is if Ulysses is the book of the day, like it depicts one day.
And what are the hours again of this?
So it starts at 8 a.m. and there's some debate about this. But in my book, I've got a pretty extensively footnoted chronology. I think it ends about 2:45 a.m. That's the book of the day, depicting a stream of consciousness. Finnegan's Wake depicts a stream of subconsciousness. So it's a book of the night. It's attempting to replicate a dream, like a night of dreaming, and like so obviously very difficult to piece those sorts of things together, and to it gives him license to be very alinear, be irrational in terms of combining words.
Just manipulate language.
Correct.
Completely.
Yeah. So Finnegan's Wake, I guess my most sustained experience with Finnegan's Wake was when my first son was born. He was up a lot at night, crying, and I would read pages of Finnegan's Wake to him at like 3 o'clock in the morning because it made about as much sense to him as it did to me. But it does have a rhythm to it, and it is one that you should read out loud because a page or two, you appreciate the musicality and some of the play on words when you hear it out loud. It is beautiful in that way, but whether I do not have at this point an interest in like doing a deep dive, and there are resources that can help you read Finnegan's Wake, like what my book is going to be for Ulysses. I have not decided that it's something that I'm ready to do. So, yeah.
Still working on Ulysses, and that's
yeah. And that's kind of where it's like, well, I'd rather just read Ulysses again than fight through Finnegan's Wake. And maybe I need to mature out of that or something, but I'll probably be exposed for not referencing Finnegan's Wake in my book by some critic or Joycean who's like, he's not the real deal. He's not talking about Finnegan's Wake. It's like, well, yeah, fair enough. I'll take that one.
Yeah, take that hit.
Yeah.
So how many times do you think you've read Ulysses? How many?
I think it's probably pushing 20 at this point. Yeah, probably between 17 and 20, I bet. Yeah.
Awesome. So the book that you're working on is coming out in a couple of years. What are you working on right now in terms of that project?
Yeah, great question. So the manuscript is due May 1st. So I've got like a timeline that I have kind of built for myself on. I'm revising the episode guides that I initially wrote and posted on the website. And I've always been kind of chipping away at those, but some of them like require more work than others. You had a question.
Well, why? So I would assume that you would have to revise and add some things, but it seems like those summaries and those guides that you've posted to your website, Ulysses Guide, are pretty thorough. I mean, you said that one of them is like almost 20 pages long. What do you actually have to do in that process of taking that and putting it into the book?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I would say that I didn't really find my voice or my process on the work that I was doing on the website until about halfway through, or like the level of detail that I think is what the book will end up being, until I got to probably the 10th episode the Wandering Rocks episode guide. So there are some of them that are like Wandering Rocks, Sirens, Nausicaa, Oxen of the Sun for sure, Circe for sure, Eumaeus, Ithaca, Penelope, like those last ones, I knew what I was doing. I knew the level of like engagement I wanted to have with outside scholarly insight, and like how often I wanted to rely on those sorts of like, what does Hugh Kenner say about this passage? What does Richard Ellman say about that passage? You know, like bringing those voices, those scholarly voices in. I really kind of found my process with that toward, in the last third of the revision, and I really found my voice about halfway through. So some of these earlier ones are still good, but they're not, at least I can tell that they aren't of the same quality, voice, or rhythm as the later ones. So some of them are close, and it's like a revision. Some of them I've had to rewrite, and I've basically just like started with a blank Word document. And that doesn't mean that I don't take a sentence here or there from what I wrote 2 years ago on the Lotus Eaters episode, or in some cases a full paragraph. But for the most part, I'm kind of like starting from scratch and rewriting those earlier episode guides just to, I don't know, I feel like I only get one crack at this, and I want to make sure that it feels coherent and of of one piece, rather than, something that I was writing for my students, and then all of a sudden I'm writing, these last things feel like they're writing a book. So I have revised or rewritten the first 5 episode guides, and I will do the 6th one certainly this month. That's my plan. And then 7, 8, I think 9 is okay, 10 is okay, 11 is going to need to be revised a bit, 12 may need to be fully rewritten or revised. So I've got some work to do. And then I'll need to, I will want to do a full reading of it, to kind of make sure that the arc of the book feels right. I also had to write a pretty hefty introduction. I did that this summer in August, September, which was pretty immersive and challenging.
What do you say in the introduction? Just kind of like why you would read this, or
so that's a preface. That's what I'm doing in the preface, the introduction. So the submitting to a university press, like that whole process was like I had no idea what that was going to entail. It's fascinating. So you submit a proposal, and for better or for worse, like me having the website out there meant that my reviewers would be able to look at the website as like a manuscript, where I was kind of like, well, don't look at that. I read that 3 years ago. Like, that's not what it's going to end up being. Or others like, yes, look at that one. That one's going to be more in keeping with what the book will end up looking like. So I submit it to the university press. They do like an internal review, and then if they decide like this is something we might want to pursue, they send it out to scholars, to an external reviewer who gets kind of contracted to evaluate the proposal and whatever sample materials they can find or that you submit. And then they give you feedback. They give the press feedback on like whether or not to pursue the project as a book, and then they also give like kind of basically like criticism and like commendation recommendation sorts of things. So one of them, the first reviewer who looked at it, his feedback was really he or she, it's all anonymous. I have no idea who it is. So that reviewer wanted me to spend a lot more time and pay a lot more attention to style, rather than kind of helping us a reader get through kind of the plot, like really do a little bit more with style. And I have some stuff on style, and I think the later ones that I've done have a lot more. But it brought to my attention the need for me to develop and put forth an overall kind of essay or thesis on how these different styles, as they change, like what they're doing and how it all fits together. So that there were books that I've read chapters of, but I needed to like read in full a few different books on Joyce's style, kind of think about their argument over the course of a full book. I'm not writing a full book on style. I don't want to do that.
That's just the introduction.
So the introduction, my solution to kind of responding to that external reviewer's recommendation, or kind of like this needs to happen, which was a really useful thing. I thought really good feedback. My solution was, okay, I'm going to write a really hefty introduction, so that ended up being like 32 pages of like narratology and kind of examination of techniques and the meaning of those things to the overall work, with the thought that some of that will find its way in my revision into the episode guides. But I think that a scholar, a Joycean who's going to pick up my book, is probably going to read the introduction and probably doesn't need to read the episode guides. They might, but they really are gonna be more interested in like, all right, let's see what this person like thinks of the whole thing, and like how are they introducing this text. And then the episode, whereas somebody just picking up the book to help them get through Ulysses might skip over the introduction, seeing that it's 30 pages, and just start with episode 1, Telemachus Guide, right?
Works for both.
And start there.
Yep.
So I wanted not to change the overall like purpose and register of the book, while also satisfying the need for a more in-depth examination of style.
Awesome.
So that was my solution to that, and the press liked that idea.
I think that's a great idea. Yeah. And are you when you're changing the kind of the chapter or the episode summaries, are you preserving kind of the, I don't know if it's more in tune with the high school kind of first reader, or are you upping the ante a little bit and adding some more kind of scholarly language in that? Because when you started out telling me about that, it was like, this is the appeal, is that it makes sense to a first-time 18-year-old or 20-something-year-old reader or college student who's just picking this up and has no clue. Are you changing that at all in terms of writing this book?
I'm hoping not to. Yeah. And that's something that I'm like guarding against, and I'm trying. I hope that I'll be able to. Like I've got some jokes that people. I get a couple emails a week from people who use the website and like reach out because they've either just finished the novel and like, hey, I just want to say thanks for this resource. A lot of them allude to the humor and like the good spirit and accessibility of the resource on the website in those episode guides. So I want to retain that while also recognizing that there is a different expectation potentially that a reader of a Johns Hopkins University Press book is looking for in a printed University Press book. I'm hoping that the voice and the accessibility, the clarity, and some of the good humor will remain, while bringing in more of that scholarly, like a little bit more, quote a few more, a little bit more acknowledgement and bringing to the reader's attention of like scholarly debates about a certain moment, or like I think that there's a room for that, and I don't think that those are mutually exclusive. I think that but I need to be mindful of, and I'm trying, like I'm not trying to wade into like literary critical waters that are going to get murky. Like my point is to get somebody through the book, and so I'm using scholarship and other scholars when I'm like, that is the best explanation of that I have ever read, and I think that my reader would find that useful.
Yeah. There's a happy medium between the two, between the first time reader, and also you should also notice that this scholar. Yeah. That's awesome. I think the introduction and the way that you're going about it is, definitely appealing to me when I want to read this again and take on this project. But
you should.
I definitely want to after doing this podcast. But awesome. Well, that's great. And I would love to also, as you're continuing this process, I think this is a good space for us to, like I had down today, like if we wanted to go through a couple of these episodes in an audio version, I think that would be appealing too to people. Just thinking about, when I was reading this in college, if I had, in addition to my class, in addition to the sections that I went to, if I had someone kind of just conversationally telling me, what is episode 5, what is it really about? I think that'd
be a blast. I'd love that. Yeah, that'd be great.
But Patrick, thank you very much for joining us today on the podcast. It's been a lot of fun,
it's
and
been great.
We'll definitely have you back on soon.
Thanks a lot. I really appreciate you giving me some of your space here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool.